It's very easy to associate the food you eat with external appearance-driven endpoints like body weight. But it's important to think about and understand how the food you eat affects you on the inside too. This is important because your internal functioning directly influences how you feel, how you look, and your overall health, which includes a healthy body composition. What you eat will ultimately make up portions of your cells, skin, hair, blood transportation systems, muscle, fat, and more. The nutrients you eat are not just being transported around throughout our digestive systems and in the blood like we've talked about. They are also an ingrained part of every cell tissue that makes up who we are and what we do. So, while the phrase "you are what you eat" is probably a bit overstated or at least oversimplified, it is in large part true. Our bodies are, to a significant extent, composed of the foods that we eat. Let me explain. Early nutrition recommendations focus strictly on the function of the human body. The main question for scientists and nutritionists was, which nutrients and in what amounts are needed to keep the human body functioning to prevent it from any obvious disease? Nutrition recommendations were basically made on a trial and error basis. Well, trial and error still has a place in nutrition, but nutrition science has evolved to be more than simply adjusting the amounts of nutrients we need to prevent disease. Nutrition science is now driven by a belief that eating should be about living to the very best that you can, living optimally, not just merely avoiding illness. Researchers have discovered that not only do the nutrients from food affect how we function, but food affects how every single process inside our cells functions as well. And in order to understand this and how each of us are made up of the same nutrients that are in the foods we choose to eat, we must begin with the basics. This takes us all the way down to the individual microscopic cell. The cell structure is the small structural and functional unit of any organism. It is the very thing that every living being is made out of. Our cells vary immensely in size, function, and chemical makeup. Each cell in our body must move, grow, consume food, excrete waste products, and react to the environment it lives in, and reproduce. Cells in the human body are constantly communicating in order to make the entire organism function. They communicate in response to our environment, what you touch, and how you move. So cells bond together to make tissues, and tissues make up our organs, and our organs make up our organ system, and our organ system combine to make the entire organism, which in this case is your body. If your cells are not healthy, they will not work properly. And if the cells don't work properly, then the tissues won't work properly. And if the tissues aren't working, then the system will begin to fail. You can see how this can easily snowball out of control. Eventually, you will most likely experience increased fatigue, decreased physical capacity, improper nutrient use, and nutrient partitioning, which ultimately lead to a poor body composition as well as some serious health consequences. By keeping your cells healthy and fed with the proper nutrients, you are keeping your whole self healthy. Consider this. The average adult body is made up of about 30 trillion cells. When old cells become damaged, new ones are made to replace them. And the nutrients we get from our food are used to make these new cells. This is the main reason why nutrition plays such a major role in cellular health, and therefore in our optimal functioning. Also, certain nutrients, like the food we eat, can protect our cells from damage and provide cells with the fuel needed to produce energy for our bodies. Just think about your cells and their need to be replaced constantly. Then think about the type of food you choose to eat. Are you choosing foods that would help make the healthiest cells possible? Help make the healthiest body composition? The best environment to be active and stay active? This now leads me to the main question for this lecture. What nutrients are needed to keep our cells healthy, and what do these nutrients actually do inside your body? To answer this question, let's take an even deeper dive into the cell by looking at some of the individual cell components and discover where the nutrients that you eat fit in. Let's start with the outermost component, the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the boundary that separates the internal components of the cell from the outside environment. It keeps all of the cellular contents safe so that they can function properly without being damaged. The cell membrane is referred to as semi-permeable, meaning that it has the ability to filter out important nutrients from damaging waste products. The membrane allows various nutrients to pass through the wall and sends the waste products out to be removed from the body. The permeability of this membrane also allows the cells to communicate clearly with one another, as we mentioned previously. The membrane must be fluid and mobile rather than too rigid and too tight to allow for optimal functioning and adaptation to the internal environment. But here's the thing. All of the dietary macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are found in the cell membrane. The most abundant form of fat found in the cell membrane are the phospholipids, which are made of a glycerol backbone, a phosphate molecule, and 2 fatty acids. Yes, fat is needed for proper cell structure and function. The phospholipids have a hydrophobic or water-fearing tail and a hydrophilic or water-loving head. This love-hate relationship with water is what gives the membrane its unique structure and stability. Imagine what a drop of oil looks like and acts like in water. This is what a cell looks like and acts like in the blood, but at a microscopic level. The unique geometry of the phospholipid with the hydrophilic heads and the hydrophobic tails causes them to spontaneously align into bilayers, like a sandwich, where the bread would be the phospholipid heads and the inside of the sandwich would contain the phospholipid tails. This way, the phospholipids are positioned with the hydrophilic or water-loving phosphate heads facing outwards and the hydrophobic water-fearing hydrocarbon tails of the fatty acids aligning on the inside of the bilayer. So the hydrophilic heads in a cell's plasma membrane face both the water-based outside of the cell and the water-based cytoplasm on the interior of the cell. Another type of fat-related compound found in the cell membrane is cholesterol. The cholesterol improves the mechanical stability of the membrane and helps to regulate the fluidity. If the diet is too low in cholesterol, cell membrane structure can be compromised. We will discuss this more in just a few minutes. The second major nutrient found in the cell membrane is protein. Proteins play a small role in forming the structure of the membrane, but they mostly contribute to the membrane functions. They direct proper operation within each individual cell and also the healthy functioning of your entire body. You see, the proteins you eat have numerous functions in your body that go way beyond the popular thought that they only need to be eaten to help with muscle function and quality and size. At the cellular level, proteins serve as pumps, gates, receptors, and enzymes or catalysts for biochemical reactions. They're responsible for the advanced communication that occurs between your cells, and they provide attachment sites for various molecules. Cellular communication occurs at all times for various reasons. They communicate to take up nutrients from your bloodstream, to excrete waste products from the body, to signal chemical reactions, and more. All of this communication is completed by the proteins that are embedded in your cell membrane. Proteins serve as channels by opening and closing when the cell receives a particular signal. They also can act as information transporters for what is going on outside the cell and within other surrounding adjacent cells. Without this sophisticated communication network, the cells throughout your body will not work together and bodily functions will start to fail. Think of it like a game of telephone. As soon as one message is not transmitted or received properly, the entire message is messed up, with the end result being the wrong message or no message, ultimately creating an environment that is likely not optimal for body composition, health, or performance. Lastly, carbohydrates are also found in the cell membrane, but in smaller amounts compared to fats and proteins. Carbohydrates contribute to membrane structure and are present in the form of glycoproteins and glycolipids that are protein and lipid molecules that have a glucose or a sugar residue attached to it. These molecules also typically function to support cellular signaling. Now that we understand how the nutrients in our food form and sustain our cell membranes, let's move on and focus to inside the cell. The next important cellular structure that is essentially built from our foods is the nucleus. The nucleus is the largest organelle or specialized structure within the cell, and it contains the cell's DNA. The nuclear envelope surrounds the nucleus. This two-layer membrane is composed primarily of lipids and proteins. It also contains minerals that are needed for activities within the nucleus itself. The nucleus can be referred to as your genetic storehouse because it contains all of your personal information within its nuclear membrane walls in the DNA. Now, DNA is a blueprint for every single one of the body proteins. The proteins that make up your tissues, your organs, and your chemical messengers and more originate from the coding of DNA and the quality of the food that we eat. And for this reason, it's vital that the nucleus has a solid structure to keep the DNA safe from damage that occurs from normal metabolic and oxidative stresses, including aging itself. Nutrition also plays an important role in protecting your DNA. In order to understand why the food you eat is important to your DNA, we need to quickly go over the makeup of it. And DNA is one of two very important nucleic acids, with the second being RNA. These are made of a nitrogen base, a 5-carbon sugar unit, and a phosphate molecule. And RNA and DNA work together to provide the codes for your cells to produce new proteins and new cells themselves. You can see how what you eat influences your DNA. Think about how important the protein you get from your diet is now that you know all of the different roles that proteins can play in your body. The final cellular structure that we will discuss is the mitochondria. You may remember the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell from your high school biology days. This nickname was given to the mitochondria because it is part of the cell that is responsible for energy production. All of the nutrients from your food are turned into energy within the microscopic mitochondria of your cells. In fact, later in this course, I'll go through how the food you eat turns into energy for you to use to alter body composition or to power a workout. Each cell that you have contains anywhere from several hundred to over 2,000 mitochondria, depending on the amount of energy that cell needs to function optimally. Your heart and your skeletal muscles are very hard-working organs that need a lot of energy. And cells within these organs may have up to 40% of their space occupied by mitochondria. Again, just like the cell membrane and the nuclear membrane, the mitochondrial membrane is made up of fats and proteins. The mitochondrial membrane has an inner and an outer layer, both of which play important roles in energy processes. The inner membrane is made up of about 75% protein. These proteins function in the final stage of energy production in something called the electron transport chain. The mitochondria also use many micronutrients to assist with producing energy. The B vitamins are particularly important micronutrients in the energy production processes of the mitochondria. And it's important to keep in mind that the structural and functional integrity of the mitochondrial membrane is absolutely critical to your health. If the mitochondrial structure and/or function is compromised, energy production from that cell will be compromised. This mitochondrial dysfunction can contribute to several chronic diseases, including diabetes, heart disease, Parkinson's disease,